Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition. Oh, that's really close. Welcome to another edition of Josh Says Mean Things, the show where I, Josh, say mean, horrific, terrible, and rotten, awful things. Somebody also got a thesaurus for Christmas, so, what's up? Hopefully the audio's working because I never get it to work right, so bear with me if it isn't. That was really something funny I said at the beginning, and, just pretend. We'll all laugh together. It'll be okay. But, Steven, you're the only one chatting right now, so let me know if you can't actually hear me, because, yeah. So, also, it's Taco Tuesday. I got my Taco Tuesday shirt on. I did not have tacos. I made an excellent soup. Yeah, working. Awesome. Well, great. Today, we'll be talking, showing photos in Lightroom. I'm going to show you the submitted photo, and then I will be taking over an edit and editing a version of the photo. So let's say it this way: the part I edit is either to highlight something I'm going to talk about in my critique, or just show you a different way to go with the edit. It's not a right or wrong. Please don't think of it as being mine's right, yours is wrong, or vice versa. It's just another way to go with things. And really, it's to highlight some Lightroom tools that I think we should all know. One in particular that I don't know why I didn't know this for 10 years. You can change the brightness and split toning for highlights, midtones, and shadows. Did anybody else know that? Did we? We're going to see it in a couple photos, but did y'all really know that? That you can change the brightness of highlight shadows? I didn't know that till 3 months ago, and I've been using it a whole bunch. Liquid tacos. Yeah. It's always tacos. Tacos are my favorite food group. I think we all knew that, though. I think they're everybody's favorite food group. They're the most perfect food ever created. They have a tortilla. They have filling. When you're done, you have nothing left. It's perfect. So some other things at the very end of the discussion today. I'm going to show you, it's not quite Lightroom, but mostly Lightroom, how I've been shooting a lot of interiors lately for buildings, for general contractors. And I want to show how I've been using Lightroom to create two kind of prep files. And then what do I do with them in Photoshop to make a nice blend. I'm really happy with this one blend. So I want to show it off, but also just show you how, because I think it's a way to make, if anybody's shooting like architecture or anything similar to that, I think it's a really nice way and pretty fast way to make it look really good, pretty quick. Anyway, let's get started. Let's see, is the chat showing up? No, we'll just go straight to Lightroom full. Okay. Less looking at my face, more looking at Lightroom, just the way we want it. Let me hit Shift F on Lightroom so we can make that bigger so everybody can see it fully. Awesome. Okay. This first photo, actually, we're going to do two photos from my good friend, Mr. Brian Nixon. This one, he says, is from White Sands, New Mexico, on a recent trip. And I'm pretty sure it was shot with a 35mm lens baby. And I really like this approach to landscape. We have this nice singular kind of white tree off to the side, but it's in focus. But we're using the selective focus of a lens baby. For those of you who don't know, lens babies make kind of poor man's tilt shifts. That's maybe the easiest way to describe them. They're really hard to get right, but I really like this. There's really only one thing to be in focus, and everything else has this kind of ethereal vibe to it. But I think this is a really good use of a tilt shift. I think it's a little bit more courageous than I think so often we, especially with landscapes for whatever reason, we take the safe approach with landscapes and we shoot them either like at 16mm at f11, or we're shooting at the other end of a 70 to 200 at like f8. And this is neither. This is a 35mm with effectively a tilt shift lens to kind of create a kind of a unique look at what a white tree in White Sands looks like. I think the other thing it does in this case, there's no doubt as to what you as the viewer are supposed to look at. Right? There's no doubt that you're supposed to be looking at this tree. You're not supposed to be looking at the sand. You're not supposed to be looking at sky, tree. All right, and just a little bit of the tree. That's where I want you to look. And I think as photographers, I think that's really one of the goals we should always strive for, which is we should take the viewer's limited time and treat it well, and let's not be too ambiguous about what we want them to see. Right, we want them to see exactly what we want them to see. In this case, the tree. So I think that's good. I like this. I think this one, he sent me 3, and this was the big jump out one for me. So yeah, I think it's really cool. Yeah. So let's go to let me show you what I did with the edit just to kind of talk through some stuff. I went kind of a more extreme black and white, way darker, but also brighter. There's also a lot more radial tools. So if we can look over here at my adjustments, I brought down the highlights just to bring a little bit of the texture into the foreground here. But look at my blacks. I took my blacks down negative 74. That's not normally something I would recommend, but in this case, I think it works for kind of more of like a stark kind of bleach bypass feel. The other thing I did, of course, I put a radial gradient on the trees just to add some clarity to them to really make them pop. The Lens Baby just gets a little soft, so I just added clarity to the general tree area. But more importantly, I used a linear gradient, and our instructions for that are just I brought up the whites, but I brought down the exposure a third of a stop. It's not a huge difference, but it's just enough to bring just that little bit more texture into the foreground sand there. So just a little difference, but the big difference is just taking those blacks from, kind of being in the mid tones and just really rocking them down all the way to negative, 75, just to give that kind of stark, maybe if it had been a shot with a circular polarizer, it probably would have felt more like this, where we're kind of taking the reflection out of the sky a little bit more. So yeah, it's just something, again, this isn't a better edit. This is just a different edit. But just to make it stand out in a different way, to go from kind of a flatter file to, if you wanted to make it a punchier file, this would be a way to do it. So anyway, nothing too crazy. Okay, let's go on to Brian's next submission, again with the Lens Baby. And I think this is a great use of a circular Lens Baby. Shoot a circular subject, right? Fish eyes are great, and circular Lens Babies are great for things that are round. Again, there's no doubt what we're supposed to look at, right? The dead center of this skylight window, I'm not exactly sure, but there's no doubt that that's what we as a viewer are supposed to be seeing. And I really love the colors. I really love the pop of them. And then the out of focus highlights are really fun. It is a fun lens to experiment. If you've never played with a Lens Baby, it is somewhat frustrating. I don't recommend shooting with one while you've been consuming alcohol. It'll hurt your brain a little too much. But overall, I think it's a really fun way to kind of mix it up. If you feel like you're in a little bit of a rut, maybe it's a really nice way to just try something different and kind of take some chances and make some failures and shoot for the moon, and maybe it hits and maybe it doesn't, but it's something to try. It's a good change of pace. I wouldn't recommend it for like an entire family vacation, like I one time did, and then my wife got mad at me because all the photos were very blurry. But for like a walk around or a photo walk, I think it's a really great choice of a lens to kind of play with. They make it like a 35 and like a 50 or 56 or something like that. So anyway, it's fun. So yeah, I like this again. Circular. I do feel like this area, kind of this lower left area, is a little too bright. I would have maybe brought that down a little bit. I do like the kind of darkness in this upper right corner there. But otherwise, I think it's really good. I will say what I'm going to change is I think this lower third of the circle is brighter than the center. And so that's the main thing I'm looking to correct. Just to match up what is in focus with what is also the brightest, just as a way, again, to our viewer to be absolutely sure that they're looking only at the thing that I want them to look at. So let's take a look at what that edit will look like. Okay, not a huge difference. Again, I know you're going to be real surprised when I tell you it's mostly a circular radial filter, and it's just there to bring up the center of stop. And it's just to bring your eye to that center sharp part and kind of diminish some of the fringing on the outside. Not fringing, but, luminosity on the outside there. So that's really the only change. And then the other big change is I brought down the highlights. The original photo had a little bit of peaking in it. So if we mouse over the highlight clipping, we can see that there was just a little bit. And so because I brought up that center value with the radial filter, I needed to bring down the highlights to stay inside of the clipping, so that if I want to make a print, I don't have an ink desert, right, where the ink doesn't lay down because there's no value, and that's something we want to try to avoid if we know we're going to make a print out of it. And then I just really overamped the vibrance there as well. It's meant to be kind of a colorful photo, and so we just really went kind of all in on that as well. Again, I kind of pushed things a little bit further in some of these edits just as a way to show kind of what I'm thinking. I don't know that I would necessarily do that all the time. I don't generally go to plus 50 in vibrance, but in this case, I think it's just a way to show like what we can do with that color and really make it pop out. I think if I had to do one more thing, I'd probably add another linear gradient to that lower left and bring that down just a little bit and bring down the highlights a little bit in that corner just to diminish that corner to make it kind of match up with the rest of the corners, to add some symmetry to the darkness throughout the image. So, yeah, really fun. I love stained glass too. My grandmother was a stained glass artist, so I always have affinity for that as well. Makes me think of my Grandma Edith. All right. This next photo is from Mr. Gary. I really love this. I'm really curious what is outside this window that is generating these kinds of reflections. When I first saw it, I thought maybe it was a photo during the eclipse where we're getting those real funky kind of scallop-shaped shadows. But I don't think that's right anymore. But I do like the symmetry going on here of the building, right? So we have the verticals and the radiator, or maybe that's a mini split. I think it's a radiator, but whatever that is, right? We have all those verticals very nice and vertical. And then we kind of have the chaos of all the reflective images of the highlights. And I don't know, that's just chaos to me. And so I like all that. I think the balance is good. I think if you put a line down the center, right? So if we go to crop tool, hit O for an overlay, and we go to that center crop, we can kind of see the balance there. Left and right, okay? So the balance on this side with light is roughly the same as the balance of the darkness on this side. And that's really nice. But also this quadrant really balances out that quadrant, and then these two are kind of equal. So our bottom right and our top left, the darkness of the top left is roughly equal to the brightness of the bottom right, and then the top right and bottom left are roughly equal there. So it's just got some nice symmetry going to it, some nice quadrants. So yeah, no, I like this. I like the chaos of it. The more I looked at it, as far as my edit, it's going to look very different photo. And what I kind of saw was really the area that stood out to me. And I'm going to show you a zoom tool. Maybe you know it, maybe you don't. If you hold Control while you're zooming in, you can draw the area you want to zoom in. And to me, this is kind of the area that is the most interesting and maybe the most abstract. And it removes things like the light switch, it removes the tile, it removes the radiator, all chances for my eye to maybe go in different directions. And so what I did was a custom crop. And I turned it black. No, I didn't turn it black and white, but and it's really just kind of this area that I was most interested in. Again, I'm not saying that this is how I would deliver this photo or export this photo, but just as a thought experiment, we took kind of just this area here as a way to really just bring the eye to exactly the chaotic part with just the least amount of structure for that chaos to play. And I looked at it again also as black and white, maybe because I saw a black and white photo earlier. And I think that could work as well. I don't know if I love it but it certainly could work. I do like all these prismatic effects that I think you lose when you go to black and white. But just another way to think about it, like I know that sometimes I get overwhelmed with scenes, and I know there's something there, but I don't always know what's there. So I take a photo because I know something's there, but I don't always know what until I bring it in to post, and sometimes not even then. And I think that's really one of the hardest things is knowing what's actually the engine of a photo, if that makes sense, like what's actually driving the uniqueness of an image or a moment, and really focusing on that and getting rid of literally everything else. So again, this crop is more as a thought experiment than it is as a this is how I'd hang it on my wall kind of thing. But just something to think about. But I do love this original one. I just think when I talk about a weight of a photo, I think this is a good example of a photo having really good weight to it. Left and right and kind of diagonal as well. So, cool. Okay. This one is shot by Mr. John. And John, hey Bill, hey Gary, glass on the door, really interesting glass. John, if you're online, I'm guessing this is from a Candace Guy workshop. It seems like her style of things. Maybe not, but it seems like it's somewhat her style. And it seems like somewhat her background as well. So yeah, this was a shibari shoot, right? The ties, the knots, the ropes, all that kind of fun stuff. And I really love this moment. Before I talk about anything, I just think it's a very soft moment. And her face being soft and relaxed when her hands and arms are bound like that, I think it's an interesting contrast. I think it's interesting in the way of, adding some. I was up in Dallas. Okay. I just think it's interesting that contrast between tension and knots and ropes and being bound, but then being very okay with it. And so I think that's neat. I think that the depth of field gets a little tricky in here. If we zoom in again, I'm going to use that control and just kind of show this bridge area. It doesn't really come out, but the bridge of the nose is definitely in focus, and neither eye is. It's okay, right? That's fine. I think maybe a little bit deeper depth of field in this case to maybe bring in the hands sharp and the eye. So I'm not sure exactly what this was shot at. F2, yeah, at F2. I think this is actually a case where maybe like F4, maybe 5.6 might have also worked to bring in that hand and the eye and the bridge. So kind of this area from the bridge of the nose all the way to the hands. I know an 85 is meant to be shoot at F2. I get that. I was just looking at some photos I shot this morning at a wedding, and I was like, I had my 135 F2, and I was like, should have shot some at 2.8, should have shot some at F4. And so I'm kind of bringing that info into this one as well. But I just would have liked to have seen that front eye have pull a little bit more focus. But I also saw the raw. We're going to look at the raw here in a second. And a really good job of color toning this because the light that it was shot on was quite interesting, orangish. Not orange, but orangish, and some other colors in there. So I think it was really well controlled. I really like this softness. A hard part for me is this kind of shadow in the hair, kind of this area right there, kind of in here. I think we kind of lose a little bit. And then I think the light's hitting kind of more her hands and more her shoulder. And so with my edit, I just want to bring a little bit more brightness to the face because that is what's in focus, and kind of diminish some of the brightness, shoulders, arms, forearms here. I did a different toning, but I actually prefer this toning than mine. I really love the color coming out of this. Just nice and blue and a little bit of red in her cheeks. The other little nitpick, I wish this little bit of the shoulder wasn't cropped out, just this area kind of right there. I wish we had just a little bit more, and maybe the whole photo, maybe like 4 inches that way, where the edge of her hair was more on this left side over here. And then we had the full tip of the shoulder coming in. I think you could also, because of how tight it is, I think you could also kind of bring it in maybe this way. And that might also work as a way. I just feel like this is a little close on that edge there. It's not enough space to be there, and it's pretty tight to prop it off. But again, nitpick. I don't think that really takes away from what the power of this image is, which is the softness of expression, and then obviously a situation that's not necessarily. I would not be relaxed in this. I would be freaking out if I was bound in that way. It's why I've never actually shot Shibari, because it actually kind of freaks me out. I had an incident when I was a kid where I got wrapped up in blankets and I couldn't get out. And it made me like really freak out. And so anytime I see this, I can't handle it personally. And so for me, seeing this and seeing that relaxed face, it would not happen to me. I would be in terror personally, but maybe that's too much about me, but there you go. I don't like being constrained. So, all right. So a couple things, too close. A couple things here with this edit that I want to show and kind of demonstrate. One, I know you're going to be really surprised by the fact that I have lots of radial filters, but one is just a third of a stop here in the center to bring more attention to the face, because I think that's the part that's right in focus. There's a negative linear, right? Negative, just 0.2 exposure, minus 20 highlights. It's kind of my standard, just soft amount of darkening from the bottom up, just to bring your eye up. I want your eyes to work up to the eyes. And then in the hair here, I raised the shadows, highlights, and whites all on this hair. I think I got lost a little bit in the shadows, especially as I started editing this photo. I started losing some detail pretty dark in the hair here. And then I also made a softening brush, so negative 20 texture, negative 23 clarity, just a little bit of contrast. And what that did, let me zoom in and I'll show you. So on the face here, we can see it was made just to soften that skin up just a little bit. And the reason, again, I think her expression is one of calm and softness and serenity. So I wanted that skin to have a softer texture. I also did a little bit of spot healing brushes. If I'd spent more time, I probably would have brought this into Photoshop in some way and really softened up the skin even more, just as a way, because I just want that smoothness all the way through. The other thing, though, is we're starting to use point color more and more. And I find that a little bit goes a long way with point color. I find the controls to have so much range that a little bit goes a very long way. And so what I did was select part of her skin. I brought up the brightness of it, and I brought down the saturation, essentially. So these are just two swatches of doing the same thing. One on the skin here, and then one on the skin on her shoulder, as a way to brighten the skin and then reduce the saturation just a little bit on both. Furthermore, we went to color grading. Again, my color grades are never a lot. Usually the circle never leaves the beginning, right? It's just a little bit, maybe 5%. But here's something I didn't know literally until like 2 months ago. This little slider underneath, you can actually change the brightness of your midtones. You can change the brightness of your shadows. And you can change the brightness of your highlights. I didn't know that. Did anybody else know that? Anybody? Because I didn't. And how come nobody told me? If so, if somebody did know that, why didn't I know till just now? But that's kind of changed how I've been editing the last couple weeks. It really allows me to take very quickly highlights, midtones, and shadows, and their relative brightness I can change very quickly now, instead of having to maybe go like tone curve or something like that. Now, I did also make a tone curve adjustment. The white I felt was getting a little too bright, so I brought my white output down so that it wasn't there wasn't any clipping, and I just very slightly brought up the midtones here. That's it. Yeah. So let me show you the before and after of the raw. Look at what the color balance was to begin with. Whew. That's tough. John, what kind of lighting was it that this was the white balance as default? That's another good question I have. So, Yeah. Anyway, I really like this photo. I like it. I'm glad that you shot something like this, and I'm glad that other people enjoy shooting this. It's just one of those things it's not for me, and I know it's a me thing and it's a nobody else thing, and that's okay too. We all have things we love to shoot. Yeah, cool, awesome. Anyway, I really like it. Ooh, Chris and Clara teaming up. So our friends Chris and Clara. Clara made this, I think, moth dress, and I think it's really neat to use internal to the photo lighting as the only light, and the idea and execution of this, I think, is really cool. I would not have shot it this way. I love this idea of a moth to the flame, and the flame is a light pole out somewhere. I'm assuming out in your neighborhood somewhere, but something I've been wanting to shoot in Pflugerville for like 2 years, and I've never made the time to do it. At the corner of Pflugerville Parkway, the southeast corner of Pflugerville Parkway and 685, there's the ghost of Pflugerville, and it's this ivy growing up a telephone pole, and it looks like this like Dementor hanging out at the intersection. And I've always wanted to shoot it, and I've just never done it. And this photo really reminds me of that in the way of, I don't know, there's something about this, that light pole, I guess, the light pole. But I love this idea of like a moth to a flame, and executed in a way that really took an idea because you had to make a dress, and then convince somebody to put the dress on and go stand at the end of a street corner, and take this photo. And then I really like the cropping of it as well, in terms of it's a very vertical photo, but there's enough texture in the trees to serve as kind of a dividing line between the upper bright and the lower dark. So yeah, I think this is pretty fun. I really applaud the idea and execution to make this one happen, because it definitely took some planning. So yeah, I really like it. Now, edit wise, my goal was to take it in a direction, maybe just try to even it out. The top light was maybe a little bright. I was losing a little bit of the detail in the bottom shadows. And so I know, again, big surprise, Josh used just 2 radial gradients here. One to bring up the exposure on the bottom, and bring up the shadows down here, but bring down the highlights. And the top, just really, I cooled it way down. I felt it was a little too orange, and brought down the highlights just to kind of control some of that highlight spill there. But then, right, so we brought down the bright part. We brought up the dark part, essentially. I could have probably also done that with linear gradient filter. That probably would have worked just as well. Just something to do. I didn't change really anything else except for split toning. And in this split toning, I went a little bit further. I just really wanted to make it feel like it was color graded, something more like a still from a movie. That was really what I was thinking as I was doing it. I pushed my midtones farther orange, but then shadows, I went purple for shadows and green for highlights to kind of play up that unreality. And then I raised my shadows of the color, and I raised my highlights but darkened my midtones. So I really accentuated just highlights, just shadows, and kind of let my midtones be less important. So I raised the importance of shadows and highlights, minimize the importance of midtones, if that makes sense. In December, 40-degree weather, of course. Of course. All the best photos are taken in December at 40 degrees. Everybody knows that. Come on. Yeah, Burkage, I didn't know that either, really, till like 2 months ago. I was fiddling around, and I was like, oh, I can do that. I agree. And John says, funky home-built fluorescent light box. Yep, that would make that color. Agreed. Anyway, I really applaud the execution, the idea here. It's such a departure also, Chris, I think, from what I normally see from you. I think it's a neat direction for some of your photos to go in. for me, I know that I would have overlit it. I would have brought out the strobes and gels and light wands and everything else, and probably pushed it too far instead of keeping it simple, stupid, and just relying on the composition and the clothes to make it work. I know I definitely would have pushed it too far. I don't think it would have looked real in my case, whereas this one just, I don't know, it feels fun. So, yeah, I think there's something in that in terms of keeping it simple. Also, I probably would take out the red. Yeah, I like that better. So, yeah. I will say there is a little bit of lens flare. If you like it, great. If you don't, just be careful about that. I get in trouble with that from time to time where I don't mean to get it. You might, extra lens hood or maybe like a matte box to keep that top light from projecting into your sensor there. So, cool. Okay. This isn't the photo. I just want to show you this so that we have a little bit of discussion with what's going on here. All right. So Jess sent me this, and she goes, "Well, this is the raw file." She's like, "But I want to show what I ended up with after generating different layers in AI. But we have this big softbox here firing. We have, I think, another light over here with a gel or something going on here, right? So there's some things to get rid of, but we have sunsetty kind of end of day temps, all those good things. And so her final image is actually this, which is not what I was expecting. The top of this tree is AI generated. This entire right hand side is AI generated. This is the full res raw photo. There's no more. This is it. And so to me, it's crazy that it did this good of a job of generating, blending. You can see some kind of weirdness maybe right through here a little bit. You can kind of see where it's not, obviously perfect. But I find it fascinating that you don't really notice that. And this whole photo, right, the light box is gone. The light over here is gone. And it's such a cool look that I was not expecting this to be the AI one when she sent it to me. So I don't know. We'll leave that up for discussion. I think I said in an earlier cast, right? We all hate AI coming for our photos, except for the times when we love using AI to help our photos get better, right? Everybody loves the new masking in Lightroom, which is AI based, but nobody likes it when, a magazine editor uses an AI illustration instead of one of our photos, right? I think that's kind of the balance. I don't think there's any room to be an AI absolutist anymore. It's going to become so prevalent in everything we do. You just kind of have to draw your own lines somewhere in a boundary. Is this a photo? I mean, yes. Is it also AI generated? I mean, also yes. I think for a photo like this, right, what does it come down to? Does the client like it? Yes, cool, you did your job. Whether what we decide to call it, I think is irrelevant. Because most clients don't care. Most clients don't care if the photo's grainy. Most clients don't care if the photo's not perfectly sharp. Most clients don't care about a lot of things that we care about. What they care about is, do I look good? Is it a good moment? And I think sometimes we have to remind ourselves of that's kind of the ultimate goal, right? The goal is, as a viewer, what excites somebody, what generates a response from the people viewing this photo. If I can generate a response, then yes, job done. If not, go back and figure out your tools better. Right? That's kind of it. Yeah, I agree, John. A plus AI. Yeah, it was really, really good. I just tried. I didn't even try to do that much. I just tried to use the Lightroom, trying to get rid of that light box, and it didn't do a great job. I think this is, again, where people say, oh, do you use Lightroom or Photoshop? To me, the right answer is, yep, I use both of them. I don't really think it's an either or. For something like getting rid of pixels, like this softbox, Photoshop is clearly better than Lightroom, like clearly better. Way more options. A lot more going on. So, yeah. Yeah. Now, as a photo itself, knowing where this light is, yeah, I probably would have had this as a soft light, closer to the subjects if possible. I feel like it's a little too direct. I feel like it's too informational, right? The light's pretty much on axis. Because you have this other light over here, I think a cross light situation could have been more interesting. You probably had enough power. You're at ISO 800 f4. So I'm guessing you had plenty of room to work with your strobe power. I don't think you were power limited, right? I don't think you were at full power on your flashes. And so I would have moved them in a way. I just don't know that that softbox at that distance is the right choice. Something more like a deep focus or a white beauty dish or something. But I think lighting her face with one light and then lighting his face with another light was maybe a different way to go with the light. We can kind of see this hard shadow coming across from their feet and legs. And so I think this one's kind of hitting that face there, but this one just gives it a little bit too much informational feel and not enough drama feel. So maybe have both lights behind the subject and lighting across so that both of their faces are illuminated, but then the shadow side is to us, the viewer. I think that's probably how I would have tried to have lit this if it was me, if that makes sense. Yeah. Also, you could bring your subjects closer to you to make them feel bigger. I don't know if that's what we're going for here, but just something to think about to play up against that sky, because they're definitely against the dark part of the background instead of our subjects being against kind of a lighter part. Yeah. Yeah. No more travel, just AI generate everything. That's why I shot with a projector this weekend, because, we can travel anywhere with a projector. So for me, I really just punched in. I gave it a cinematic crop, 16:9 crop, and just brought it down to get rid of that. So instead of trying to use tools to eliminate, this, I just cropped it out. But I still think it carries the weight. I probably would have done a little bit more bringing the sky back into this top area here. But that's really all I did. Nothing too much. I kind of struggled for how I wanted to do it. I brought up the shadows. I brought down the highlights. We're going to look at this couple again in another photo here in just a sec. So, but yeah, I think this is a finished output is really fun. The fact that the tree is finished off kind of blows my mind because it's not there in the original file whatsoever. And so that's really a neat way. And it really kind of brings in the feel of a couple alone in this moment, kind of by themselves, right? The tiny people, big landscape trend, which I'm seeing less of lately, but it's something I've always liked. I think if you're delivering an album or a set of prints, I think it's a great one to have in terms of a change of pace photo, right? We can, and then pair this up with like a super detail of just the hands, or like a super detail of like, a slice of her face on his shoulder, right? And so we can kind of get that super wide, super tight, have a medium shot. And by changing up those framing elements, we can add some diversity and some drama to albums and other things that we might want to deliver, right? We don't want every engagement photo to be at the same, the same focal length, the same distance away from the subject. That gets boring after time. So I think having a photo like this with just unexpected weight and unexpected view is really kind of neat. And the other thing here, by removing the lights, it really does make it feel like there's like a light of God like illuminating them. And I see the sun rays kind of trying to trickle in there though those were the ones that were illuminating it, but the sun's coming from a completely different direction. So we know that's not, but I'm sure the couple's like, look at us, like it's like we're dancing on a stage and we have a spotlight on us, right? That's kind of a neat effect. So. All right, so this is, I'm guessing, another one from the same shoot. Yeah, same couple. So a couple things here. I think our softbox that we're probably using here should have been closer. If we look, I think that backlight is good. I do worry that it's illuminating a little bit too much of this tree. And I don't know if that's the front light or the backlight doing this, but with these bare branches, especially this one close to his head, I'd rather it not be so illuminated. So either in post or by where we place our lights. But then also this shadow neckline here means that light wasn't high enough. So when guys are wearing collars, we need to move that light up so that the shadow is coming through that channel between his chin and the collar, so that neck gets a little bit better illuminated instead of this like triangular shadow right there on his collar to chin. Okay, that's because the light back here isn't high enough to create a shadow coming downward. Okay, I think that the value of the light, right, the intensity of the light is right, but the angle needs to change up a little bit. And then I think bringing that softbox that we saw earlier in much closer to the faces is really going to play that off. Now, I did notice we're at 1600 ISO, but we're at 6.3. And so I would have liked to have seen that in this case, that aperture drop down to maybe like f4, maybe somewhere there, 2/8 f4 range. It's still enough to pull focus of their eyes, but I think we could, or lowering that shutter speed to bring up the color in the sky. So that's kind of our balance. It's hard when the light's fading that quick, and I get that. But I think this background relative to the brightness of our subject is just a little bit low, and so we're losing all this detail, right? There's just a lot of detail here that's just kind of gone. Another thing, this hand feels kind of awkward right here, right? These hands. And so this is a great way for his arm to come across this way instead of the hands being hidden back here. That hand maybe would have been served to be up on this shoulder, and then that hand kind of coming across and grabbing that. So just another way to think about it. Right, it just feels a little promy with the hands there, which I'm guessing is someone like an engagement photo. So I'd like to have seen a little more connection. There's also a phone in this pocket here. Throw that phone in the back pocket so that we don't see that little. I've had to edit way too many couples photos. I'm going to be way harsh on this photo because this is the type of thing I edit the most. But yeah, bring the lights off the trees, more focused, do this channel right through here, and then a slightly different pose. I would have her maybe turn where she's facing into him and they're looking back at you. His back could be turned and kind of looking back as well. And then this branch right there. Be careful of that one too, right? Kind of cutting through the scalp of his head. So just things to look at. But getting that softbox in closer, I think would bring more life to the eyes, especially his eyes. Hers are okay. But getting that softbox closer, it's going to brighten those values in there as well. So my edit, and so really the edit here is just brighten up their faces to kind of make them the star of the show, and then add some shadow detail in the back here, right? So it's a much brighter photo overall, I get that, but just bringing in, right, making their faces the brightest thing. And then I had a negative gradient. Well, I had a lot of gradients here, but a negative one to bring down the brightness of those trees, select subject, and I think that wasn't, I don't know what I did much of that. I did nothing. I brought up the highlights and shadows. Okay. But then this radial is also trying to darken the highlights here to minimize the brightness of those branches. So, yeah. And I feel maybe this is a little too contrasty. A lot of my portraits lately, I've been doing negative clarity as a global modifier, and I feel if there's an area that needs some clarity, that's more of a brush or a radial or a linear gradient. But overall, I've really been adding more negative clarity to the bulk of my photos. So, ooh, maybe my favorite photo to edit. This one's from Jim. Jim, are you listening today? I don't know. This is from Jim. It's a really cool morning, and I really like the triangle that this light is getting, right? We have all this like milkweed throughout, right? And it's just catching that sunlight that's coming from back here. And this is Jim's edit. And I think it does a good job of conveying like the softness and the kind of that early morning feel, right? This photo definitely has a vibe of like a boggy early morning, foggy morning, which I love. I love foggy mornings in Texas. It's a good vibe. Again, I was kind of making fun of it earlier, but look, 16 millimeters and almost f8, right? Kind of our standard for. Imagine this photo shot with a lens, baby, right? Very different feel to it. Okay, just as something to work back to. Oh, he is here. Oh, maybe in Holland, but he's here. Look at that. I really enjoyed editing this photo. I probably went to town more on this one than any of the others. But what's working? I love that there's a depth. So we have this first triangle from here across to there. So that first triangle, right? That's our foreground. This creek or bog here is kind of our dividing line. And then we have an opposite triangle coming across there, right? So we have triangle, line, triangle, okay? Two kind of isosceles triangles kind of laying on top of each other. And then this just foggy. So we have a background. So we have foreground, middle ground, background. But the background's just nice and soft and kind of there, but not really, right? Just that very good vibe. I like the crop. It's got a good cinematic feel, right? It's more of a 16 by 9. What is it, 16 by 10? 16 by 9, pretty close. Right, that's almost exactly 16 by 9, maybe not quite, but that cinematic vibe, just all kinds of good things going on. Again, I like using this overlay. So if we go to the crop tool, we can get different overlays by hitting O. That Fibonacci was a good one too. Right, shift. I can kind of see that arc coming through here. Right, as a way to illuminate. But I think the center one is good for seeing balance, right? And so we can see, again, this lower left and this lower right are roughly opposite. And then this lower right and this lower upper left, the orange to the blue. Can we see that color contrast diagonally here? And then we have oranges here and blues here diagonally here as well. So just AI flamingo. Yeah, we need AI flamingos in there. That's right, Chris. So just something to look at. I like using this overlay as a way to check balance and weight of a photo to see kind of where are my diagonals. You can also use this one to kind of show, and this one kind of shows the same thing, right? We have these cool, balances to it. So I really like this as an idea. So for me, if I'm looking at something like this, I really want to play up the orange. I really want to play up the blue. I really want to emphasize that it's that foggy soft. So those are all the things I'm telling myself as I'm editing, right? Soft, warm and cool, and we want to have those contrasts in the photo to give the viewer something to think about. So let's take a look at what I did. I left the crop unchanged. This is the raw file, and something else in here. There's actually a flock of birds going in. Let's zoom in on that. Control zoom. We can see there's actually birds flying. Hey, birds. But I really wanted to have this background be very soft, but really feel like that orange was just first light seeping through these trees. And then from there, the rest, I really wanted to emphasize that cool, right? Let's see how cool that it is over here. So it really feels like this is the first, instant of light coming across the scene. That's kind of what was going through my head. It was also German expressionist paintings were also going through my head. Look it up if you want to see what I'm talking about. But that's kind of where that's what I'm thinking as I'm doing it. Always change that profile to neutral for that soft feel. And if you notice, I did negative dehaze. Well, what does dehaze do? Well, negative dehaze adds haze. It's a foggy morning. So we added haze, right, by going negative. So we de-dehazed. But we also did negative clarity just a little bit. So I really want to emphasize less sharp, less contrast. And even with our global adjustments, right, by adding shadow, by taking down highlights, it's really bringing that photo even flatter, right? Raising shadows, killing highlights it's going to reduce our contrast even more. And I didn't do any global contrast whatsoever. I warmed up the overall photo. And then a couple. This is pretty normal for me to have, 5, 6, 7, 8 masks. So from the top, I darkened the top down. I kind of selected this area, again, to even more bring up the shadows and bring down the highlights in this area here. From left, I warmed it up. My temp is plus 83 from left to right. From right to left, I cooled it down minus, let's call it 20, to really emphasize blue to orange coming across. And then in this specific area, I really wanted to feel like another ray of sun. So highlights, shadows, even more orange, right? So it feels like even more of the center gets even more orange in the center. And then from the top down again, I just darkened it again in a slightly different way. But then the last is this one radial through the water here to make sure this water got even darker, because reflections are always darker than the things. So I needed the water darker than the sky, because otherwise it wouldn't feel real. Does that make sense? Because the reflection is always, right? If you look in the mirror, you're darker than your actual person. And so I really wanted to emphasize that this was darker than the sky that it was reflecting. Okay, so that's what that one's pulling. Now, all of that. And then I took out the vignetting of the 16 by 35. And so it started with that, but I actually liked it having more vignetting, because then I thought it brought your eye more to these trees and the left-hand side. If we pull that crop, all right, kind of everything's below that center line. So all texture, all sky, kind of all orange, all blue. Something to think about. Anyway, I really like this moment. I think it's a very nice morning. That soft glow. No. Anyway, German expressionist painting. Yes, you did run far away, Burkett. You went all the way to another country to freeze your butt off. All right, this one's from Michael Michu. Nice fireworks. I'm guessing either 4th of July, but probably New Year's. Nice long 5-second exposure. You can even see the firework like starting there, right? You can see all the way from the launch all the way to the top. So nice 5-second exposure against the Google building. I would have liked to have seen the top right there. Maybe we bring that into AI and finish off those trails right here. I wish those weren't there, or edit those 4 out and leave those other 4 beneath it would probably be the way I would go. Otherwise, I like the cropping. I think the balance of the starburst against the buildings is good. The other hard part about these is it's always a lot of haze in the sky and smoke in the sky from the explosions of the fireworks themselves. Another thing to think about is maybe a little bit wider. You're at 28, so to see more of the reflection down here, right? So you can have that symmetry or crop up. So I think in general, either being here, maybe getting just the buildings, right, where we're not trying to look for the reflection in the water, or shooting wide enough to get that reflection all the way down here. Just for fireworks, it's kind of hard to see, obviously, before you do it, but trial and error. The other thing I always love about like on the water is you get these good reflections from buildings, so that can be really fun as well. So let's take a look at what we would do for something like that. So fireworks, especially, a lot of times you get these like really hot spots in the centers of the trails. So brought down the output on my tone curve just enough, and then brought up the midtones to kind of bring out detail in the background here. No radials, no linears. Brought up the shadows just to see more of the city behind. A lot of vibrance. I took down dehaze again because I want to feel less contrast. It's a pretty flat image, right? All the data is kind of in one spot. So by going negative on dehaze, it's going to open up that file a little bit more. And by shadows killing the highlights, doing the same thing. So kind of a simple fix. A lot of vibrance to bring out the colors of the fireworks. That's really all we did here. And then some color grading. Again, just something to start looking at by changing the colors of shadows, highlights, and midtones, and then changing the relative brightness. Going to be doing that a lot. But so yeah, things I would fix there. I'd probably take out, this line, that line, that line, that line, or AI fill those in. And then, I want to see that the reflection fully down here. Kind of the 2 ways to think about it. But otherwise, cool. I like 5 seconds. Sometimes people only do 2 seconds. I feel that's never quite enough to see kind of from beginning to end. So really fun. Oh, Burkett from the freezing cold. Jess is a bad influence. Jam, I figure you see sunrises by staying up late enough to see them. I figured that's how you see them, is by staying up all the way through the night and seeing them that way. Stephen, how cold were you when you took this photo? I can see your aperture, ISO, and shutter speed, but I can't see the thermostat on this one. If I remember correctly, Stephen said this was his phone edit from a moment he was out in Lake Louise this past week shooting at a winter landscape workshop, which is really cool. Literally very cool. I really love the orange-blue contrast going on here. Right, we have deep blue in the shadows, bright orange in the center. I would have liked to have seen maybe a little bit more detail kind of in this area here. I know it's a phone edit. I'm nitpicking. You always send me all these like super edited photos, so I get to actually like tell you something here. I feel the blues maybe a little much, but I think the overall idea of making this like the sun coming through, kind of like we just did with Gems, where the sun's only illuminating part of the sky, and not necessarily the whole sky is being orange. Also some dust spots in there. You can see 1, 2, 3. I think maybe you have a hair. Some more dust spots. Maybe there's snowflakes on the lens or something. I don't know. But I love these like billowy as a foreground, right? We got a good foreground, good diagonal middle ground. And then our background with a nice mountain of some sort with a good sunrise, just not quite there yet. So again, really nice. I'm guessing it's sunrise. It feels sunrise. I could be wrong, but it feels sunrise. So yeah, I really love this moment. I think vertical is really hard to do for landscapes. I think just naturally when we're at a place like this, it's so easy to shoot horizontal because that's kind of that's how our eyes see naturally. And so it's hard to kind of overcome that and come up with an interesting composition that isn't, horizontal. I think this is shot at f11. I'd be curious what this would look like with the lens blur tool. Let's see if I don't crash the computer here. But keeping just these mounds and little billowing things, and then letting everything else go blurry could be something to play with. Again, it's not a better option. It's just a different option. It's analyzing. It's thinking. Make sure I don't crash the whole stream. Oh, there we go. And so just this, kind of recreating, shooting this at 2.8, where we really focus on these mounds here. Right, we really let the focus go there and just blur everything else out. So we can kind of play with those sliders, right? We can play with those sort of things. It's a really neat tool. It is beta. I have had some crashes from it. It will eat up your GPU cycles for sure. But just something to play with in landscape, right? Maybe that kind of lens baby vibe where we're really being intentional on what is and what isn't in focus. And that mountain's still there, but you know what? It's not quite there. So it's just something to play with. I'm not right or wrong, but just something maybe that you want to experiment with. I know how much you love to experiment with all those things. That one's kind of fun. Donut holes. So anyway, just a really cool sunrise moment. I actually prefer sunrises for landscapes than I do sunsets. So really what I try to do is just same version, but way softer, and just a little, which crazy for me, but just way more, try to be subtle. I went with an 8x10 crop. Generally for me, again, this is for me, I like my verticals in 8x10s. I like my horizontals in like 3x2s or 16x9. It's just me. I really just did 2 radials. I started with 2 radials. Brought in a bunch of orange and brightness and shadows kind of through the center part. And then I inverted it and brought down exposure, highlights, and temperature to bring in that cool in the top part. I'm not saying I necessarily I did it kind of quick, but, and then I painted in, a little bit more kind of through this river here. I really wanted that to show up a little bit more. I wanted to warm up that bright area there, and then kind of brighten up this. I thought this got a little too dark there. Again, it's just a way to go. I've been trying to be more painterly in my landscapes. I have a tendency to want to turn all the sliders to 100. And so for me, just as an exercise to bring it back down and be a little more subtle and let my composition, let the moment kind of do the heavy lifting instead of, delivering a file that's like, it was edited, right? I'm trying to get away from that. I have a tendency, I don't have the confidence all the time to just let the moment stand or just let the composition stand. Sometimes I get my own way with forcing edits. So, yeah. Yeah, but otherwise just crank some vibrance, but it's mostly radials through here. Very cool. Okay, this one comes from Miss Tiffany. Shot at a old grain bin in San Antonio. I think my biggest critique here is there's two parts to it. One, when somebody has their face and their hair parted here, I would have liked to have seen the light modifier be on this side, right on camera right, subject left, to fill in the shape of the face there. Just to make that a little bit more even, because it's shooting through that hair, and we're getting some pretty deep shadows through the eyes. That's kind of the first thing that I see. Also, I feel like it could have been maybe with a softbox or a beauty dish instead of the bare mod to bring in some softness, especially under the chin here. Probably would have done that. And then color in the sky, I'd want to bring down that make the sky a little more blue. An easy trick, if you're shooting on like a gray day, is set your white balance to tungsten or fluorescent, and then add a warming gel to your flash. And so you can shift the sky blue, and your flash can illuminate orange, but it'll cancel each other out, and so you'll have a neutral subject with a blue sky. So just something to think about if you're ever in that situation where you're lighting something but the day's kind of gray or not really interesting. Shift it to tungsten, let the background go blue, let the sky go blue, and then add a little warming gel to your flash. And it's an easy way to kind of cheat ambient in that sense. I do like the angle. I like that it's somewhat asymmetrical. I would have liked to have maybe not just caught that top right there. Right, but it's kind of a fun moment. It's a fun, energetic pose. The other thing for me, I hate seeing light on the ground. I feel like it reveals my secrets. If I imagine that I'm a magician, seeing my strobe light hit the ground is like you're seeing the card that I'm hiding. And so a lot of times I'll take a filter of some sort and kind of neutralize the shadows on the floor there. And then that way you're not seeing how it was lit by the shadow. Maybe up here you would, but you wouldn't see it down by the feet. The other way to hide it, of course, is just crop it out. Right. And that feels different, right? That doesn't feel as lit as when we see the shadow, right? Because now our brain knows exactly how it was done. Magicians showed their trick. But yeah, I think it's a fun moment. Good like pose where they're turned to the camera and they're spinning back. That's good energy, hair flipping around. I just would have liked to have seen the light on this side for this particular shot. Also, when you're shooting these big buildings like this, the further away you can get from the building, if you're trying to show the building, the better, right? If we're shooting the Eiffel Tower, we don't shoot it at the base of the Eiffel Tower, right? We're shooting it hundreds of yards away so that we get the scale, so that it's not dominating the person, right? So moving further away from the big buildings so that we're still emphasizing the person and de-emphasizing the building so that we have a little bit easier relationship. Miguel, what's up, bud? Oh, Burkett said it was negative 55. Yeah. Woo. Yeah, I knew it wasn't your real edit, Steven. That's why I was giving you a hard time. Also, lots of dust spots. What's up, Miguel? So kind of what I was talking about, I think this edit feels, I kind of blued up the sky. You're my boy, Blue. But more specifically, just a linear down here to kill the highlights. And that two things. One, your eye more generally comes up to her face, but we're kind of hiding a little bit more of the card up our sleeve, so you don't see the lit part of that photo. And then just a radial filter around the outside of her. I left her where she was, everything outside that circle gets blue, right? So it gets less warm. And so now we have blue and warm contrast, right? So again, it makes the face pop even more, but it makes the photo more interesting by having a color contrast as well as a lit and unlit contrast. All right, so this this is going to be a little bit different here. This is the bonus. This is my photo, shot at a sorority house, and so this is an HDR. So this is a 3. I did +3, 0, -3, and I shot it with a circular polarizer. Now, the reason I shot with a circular polarizer, especially in a floor like this, it really protected the glare on the wood here. Without it, this would be almost white. Okay, right, this area. And so I edited my raw to get the room looking correct. Okay, but my windows are gone. So I created a virtual copy of the same photo. Okay, this is the exact same edit, right? All my geometry stayed exactly the same. The only difference was this is much darker. This is at -2, and this one's probably like +3 stops. Yeah, so +3 stops for this one, and then basically neutral, right? But that brings in this hallway, and this brings in the windows a little bit, okay? So there's really no way in Lightroom to get those two to balance out, right? There's really no good masking tool that will allow me to pull this wall and window and floor, but keep the brightness here, right? I didn't want to boost my shadows because I lose contrast, right? And so what I did, I'll show you the end result real quick, and then how I did it. So it's literally just that wall, okay, and then the foreground from the other two, okay. But I think this blend feels pretty natural. And so the way I did it, again, I edited this photo all the way that I wanted to, including geometry, crop, spot removal, all of those things. Ooh. And then clicked on the two files, edit in Photoshop. Okay, let's see if we can really crash the computer now. Okay, so it's going to send those two files over to Photoshop. Okay, I'm just going to take the dark one, put it on top of the, right, so I have two layers, right? So now I have my base layer, I have my window layer. And so I'll do this fast, but just to show you, right? I'm going to take my pen tool, and then I'm just going to trace kind of the area and what I want to be brought in. Okay. And this is, again, this is kind of a fast version of it. But once I close the loop, I can hit mask. And you can see that it very quickly gives me a pretty close approximation of what I showed you. And then from there, we just rasterize the mask. And then I can go through with my brush tool and layer masking tools, and then easily paint in what I need to paint in. Right. So I'm just painting on that mask now. And I can go through and soften those up. Oh, I'm not on the mask brush tool. Does that make sense? Oh, my opacity is like 10%. That's why. Right, so I can kind of go back and fill those gaps in however I want to do it. But it's just a good starting spot for starting my layer mask with the pen tool around the areas I want to bring in quickly. When I'm done, I would save it, and it brings it all the way back. into Lightroom. So it round trips all the way from there. But just I just want to show you kind of the mechanics of how to do that. The finish looks way better. I spent, probably 20 minutes on getting that layer mask. But I think if you look close, you might see a couple little areas that I missed, like right there. Missed that. But I don't think you notice that unless you're looking for it. First glance, right, you see how bright it is here, so your eye is going over there anyway. But it's just a way to kind of bring in a natural fill in a simple way where you don't have to worry about aligning two separate frames. I created a layer mask first. An HDR DNG first, did all my edits, and then created a virtual copy of the same file. So I had a plus and a minus for the interior, one for the exterior. Did a pen tool to draw on the windows, and then combined them. So I hope that wasn't too quick. Yeah. Woo! But that's how I've been doing. And then I've been painting with like a very low opacity brush to really fill in my edges and make it quite nice. But yeah, I've had to shoot a lot of buildings lately. So that's just a way for me to have done that. So yeah. Anyway, I hope y'all enjoyed. I want to start an IBM or photo project. That's a great question, Miguel. Hit me up offline. Let's talk about it. This decor in this house was crazy. Every chair, every couch was sponsored and donated by somebody. It was cool. It was cooler than I thought it would be. There were some president's daughters in the sorority house. Let's say that. Yeah. That went to UT, if you can figure out the math on that. So yeah, anyway, can you believe it? Episode 36 of Josh Says Mean Things. Whew, started in the pandemic and we're still going strong. But thanks for all submissions. I think it was a really interesting group of submissions this round. There was a couple I couldn't show. You know who you are. Oh, I just realized I probably didn't get Binky's photo. Sorry, Binky, if you're watching. I totally forgot to add your photo. Dang it. I'll get you next time. I'm jealous of the colors out of your camera. Yeah. Makes my Canon R6 not look good anymore. But also, I'm going to be working some more on Lightwhip tomorrow, so I'll have a post out for y'all next week about that. Yeah, if you have any questions, hit me up offline. Happy to chat through anything I talked about. All right, guys. We'll see y'all soon. Appreciate it.